really want to film out here today. The weather is so nice, but it's a little windy and the streets nearby, so it gets a little loud. So let's change up the scenery. There we go, much quieter. So first of all, thank you so much for coming back to my channel, and we'll just get right into it. So you already saw the title of the video. We are going to talk about whether Korea is racist. And just have a candid conversation about this, because it's a question that I hear a lot and a common talking point for people, foreigners who have visited Korea. So before getting started really talking about this, I kind of want to preface this conversation with 2 points that I think are really important when talking about, race in Korea. And that first thing is going to be that we have to realize and keep in mind that Korea is an extremely homogeneous place. I think the current statistic is that it's about 96% Korean and only 4% of people living in Korea are non-Koreans. And even within that 4%, a large proportion of them are actually other East Asians. So that's one thing to bear in mind as we approach this kind of topic. The other thing, though, which is probably more important, is that race is an American social construct. And I don't want to go too far down the path talking about this, but we just have to remember that when we are even talking about people being racist or racism, it's a very American thing, and race is a social construct that was created in 20th century in America for very specific political purposes. Well, as Americans, we think everything is about race, but in the rest of the world, it's not so much. Race is a very recent concept, like I mentioned, 20th century, so mid 1900s. Before that, and up until today, in other parts of the world, it's more about xenophobia. So negative feelings towards people, not because of their race, but because they're from a different country than you. And then also colorism, which exists very much and is very alive in Korea, but that mostly gets expressed in beauty standards, which I will be mentioning a bit later. And like I said, don't want to get too social science-y here, but it's just important to bear in mind that we are going to be applying an American social construct to some place that's, quite frankly, not America. Surprise. So with that in mind, let's get into it. So when I've thought about this, I've kind of come to divide this topic up into 3 arenas that kind of contribute to the question of, are Koreans racist? We're going to talk about stereotypes, we're going to talk about beauty standards, and lastly, just plain old ignorance. So we'll start off with stereotypes. Usually when my friends ask me, or I'm messaging them, or when I was texting them while I was in Korea, they're always like, I'm sure, Koreans or Asians, they're super racist over there, right? And my response to them is always like, meh. And really, that's just to say that it's different in Korea. And I explained this through an example. So in America, where I'm from, it's not an uncommon situation where maybe I'm walking through a parking lot, I'm walking back to my vehicle, and as I'm walking by, I quickly hear like people locking their car doors. And of course, you could be like, they do that, for anyone. You'd be scared if any person of any color is approaching your car, right? But when I was in Korea, that kind of thing never happened. That kind of thing would never happen. It doesn't matter. And get back around to the aspect of stereotypes. It speaks well to the stereotypes and how the stereotypes that are held are different, and also the extent of depth they are also different. And what I'm saying is, in America, you have stereotypes associated with each race that are very, deep-rooted stereotypes, very historically rooted stereotypes, things that have been around for a long time. So for me, as a Black person, stereotypes that I can point to regarding Black people are that all Black people are thugs, hoodlums, criminals, thieves, things like that. And that's not to say that in Korea they don't have stereotypes about people who look certain ways, but they're different. So again, I'm speaking as a Black woman. So the stereotype against me that holds in Korea is mainly that Black women are very sexualized. And that stereotype, contrary to the deep-rooted stereotypes that are in America, that stereotype comes from some very recent media. Most of the exposure that Koreans get to Black people is through the media, and namely Nicki Minaj and Beyonce. So that kind of contributes to that whole sexualized stereotypes. But it's nothing like the stereotypes that are held in America against Black people. On the flip side, interestingly enough, while I was in Korea, I was often compared to Michelle Obama, and more recently, actually, only one instance this happened. Someone compared me to Oprah Winfrey. I don't know. So as you can see, that kind of, the stereotypes are quickly changing as they're being exposed to different types of Black women. Second thing I'm going to talk about are beauty standards. So as I mentioned, Korea is a very homogeneous nation, and because of that, there are kind of very strict, defined beauty standards that exist within the country. So that means having very pale skin, having double eyelids, having a high nose bridge, having a small face, long legs, of course, things that are often highly unattainable for even the average Korean woman. But you can look at me, my skin is nowhere near pale. I've got thighs, I've got booty, so I'm very far from what is considered to be beautiful in Korea. And then the last aspect that might contribute to this whole conversation is just plain old ignorance. And I don't mean like ignorance in the, mean kind of attacking manner, like, oh, you're so ignorant. No, I mean it like by the definition. Ignorant means lacking knowledge. So a lot of it's just from Koreans lacking knowledge about foreigners and people that don't look like them. A lot of people always say like, oh, Koreans have one of the fastest internet speeds in the world. They should be able to know about everything that they have access to at their fingertips. But having lived in Seoul for close to 5 months, I can attest to this, that when you're living in Korea or when you're living in Seoul, it's very easy to have just complete tunnel vision concerning the world. Other parts of the world, they look towards the West for, media consumption, music consumption, so they get a lot of Western influence that way. Korea has its own K-dramas. Korea has its own music that's even popular all over the world. Something that's really globally known, like Google, that's used all across the world, that oftentimes you can think of it as a uniting factor. Korea doesn't use Google. Korea has their own version of Google called Naver. So they don't even have to look outside to, use a search engine. They can just use their own. And then they also have Samsung, and Samsung creates everything from cell phones to housing buildings to anything you can think of, even weaponry, So Koreans don't really have too much of a need to look too far past themselves. The good thing that I can qualify that though with is that Koreans are very interested in learning about things. So whenever I said, oh yeah, my family's from Nigeria, they were always so interested and really wanted to know more. They'd be like, oh, Nigeria? What does that mean to be Nigerian? Like, what does the culture look like? What does the food look like? They're kind of interested. They want to know more, which is definitely more than I can say for many Americans I know of. So, long story, we can funnel that back into the simplistic question of, are Koreans racist? Yes and no, as it probably is for many other places. You're gonna get looked at, you're gonna get questions that you don't usually get because they're unaware of differences or different people, but it's not something that will bring danger to yourself most of the time just because of your race. So yeah, that's about it. I'm very interested to know about other people's experiences, you know, as visible, what I'd like to call visible foreigners. So that kind of excludes East Asians who aren't as visibly foreigner when they walk through a crowd. So as a visible foreigner, or even as a less visible foreigner, just non-Korean in general, how do you think race exists in Korea? You know, I mentioned it's a little hard that we're applying an American construct to somewhere that's not America, so things get a little twisted. But let me know, do you think Koreans are racist? Are you Korean? And how would you answer this question? Are Koreans racist? Are they not? Are there subtleties in there that get overlooked when people ask this generic question? Let me know in the comments wow, I can't speak. Let me know in the comments below. And with that, I will be leaving you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to watch my video. You can hit that like button, leave a comment down below, maybe subscribe while you're at it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.